Hey there guys, and welcome to FP1, and let's have a chat then about the Mexican Grand Prix. Now, before we start then, let's just have a chat about that podium. Lewis Hamilton getting hoisted up whilst stood on his winning Mercedes car. That was fantastic, a brilliant thing to watch. Hopefully something that F1 keep doing. I know Sebastian Vettel was a little bit critical about it, especially with the selfie guy as well. Maybe that was going a little bit too far, but fantastic. Good to see F1 trying things, and yeah, I'm all for it. Bring it on. Let's have more of that. Let's then get into the more important things, and firstly talk about Mercedes and their masterclass for a weekend. I think they probably came into the race with maybe the third fastest car. Red Bull definitely fastest, and definitely Ferrari as well, and they pulled it off. They had a brilliant strategy, didn't really falter when things looked a little bit shaky at the start of the race, and Hamilton absolutely drove like a god today. I don't know how he had those tyres on for so long. I mean, he went to the hards, and I can't remember what lap it was, and just kept them going, and it was fantastic. And obviously holding on Sebastian Vettel at the end, it was maybe a little bit of an anticlimax. I think maybe Sky Sports, some of the other commentary teams probably bigged it up a little bit too much. But yeah, in the end, Hamilton comfortably clearing Sebastian Vettel, with Valtteri Bottas coming in third place. Now that, of course, means Hamilton doesn't win the championship. He needs 4 more points, though. So I think it's pretty obvious we're going to see that championship wrapped up at the next race in the USA. But that was Mercedes then. The team that probably should have won this weekend, which was Ferrari, they threw it all away. And again, it was another 1-2 start, which for once they actually kept that 1-2, unlike back in Japan. But it was just strategy this time, and it's another instance where Ferrari have just thrown points out of the window and just given them to Mercedes. Obviously, that strategy with Leclerc seems, I mean, obviously going back with hindsight, it was a bit 2020, but if you think about it, this Mexico is not an easy track to overtake on, despite that massive long straight and then the 3 DRS zones. So why would it make sense to put a car onto a 2-stop strategy where they're going to have to fight through the field of cars that are only doing 1 stops, like Hamilton was in Mercedes? And it just, I don't know, maybe looking back on it, it makes more sense than it did at the time, but it just seemed like a bit of a weird choice for Ferrari. And again, they had that slow pit stop with Leclerc as well, which didn't really help things. He came home in like 4th place in the end, I think it was. And for someone who started on pole, that is a big shame and a big disappointment in Maranello. Another driver today, I think, who really just messed up a lot was Max Verstappen, and I appreciate I'm probably getting a lot of hate for that, but he had, 3 clashes, one at the start with Hamilton, then a few laps later with Bottas, and then again, maybe, I think the midpoint of the race, it was with Kevin Magnussen, and now, albeit none of them were maybe completely his fault, I still don't think that he should really come out as the innocent party in all of those cases. I mean, Hamilton, it's at the start of the race, and maybe Hamilton could give him a little bit more space, but that Mercedes was out of shape anyway, and Verstappen probably should have backed out of the move by that point. But anyway, the 2 clashed, they went over the grass. I think that was where Hamilton picked up his floor damage as well. And again, going back to Lewis, driving with the damage to his car, if you haven't seen the photos, go and Google them. That floor in that Mercedes was absolutely ruined, and yeah, he still somehow pulled it out of the bag. But anyway, going back to then Verstappen, I think it was lap 7 he came and collided with Valtteri Bottas. Now that move was just unnecessary, really. He could have just waited. He was clearly faster than the Mercedes. I had to wait maybe one more sector, get the DRS down the main straight, into turn 1 be fine. But instead, he went for it in the stadium section, in the place where I don't think anyone's overtaken a similarly paced car before. And I guess Bottas wasn't even expecting it. Obviously, it's nowhere you'd really expect to have a dive bomb down the inside. But anyway, the 2 clashed with, I think, Bottas's front wing to Verstappen's end plate, and then there was a puncture out of that. Didn't show straight away, so it just looked like Verstappen just sort of lost drive at the final corner. But Bottas got him back. Verstappen gets thrown to the back of the field. In fairness, a good recovery up to 6th, but that clash just wasn't necessary, and I think he did have the pace to win this race. I think Christian Horner even came out and said, looking from the data, Verstappen could have won it today, and he's just really thrown it away. Now, the clash with Magnussen's maybe more weighing on the side of Magnussen's fault. He did kind of cut across him a little bit, but again, it's a case of Verstappen just going in for a move, which he didn't really need to go for in the first place. He could have just left it down a couple of the corners and made it, again, turn 2, not really the most ideal place for an overtake unless you're alongside into turn 1. And he just came from a way back, and I mean, to be fair, Magnussen took the racing line. It's a difficult one to call, and they didn't put any penalties on it in the end, but yeah, it could have gone a lot worse. I mean, Verstappen could have lost his front wing, and that's another pit stop, and again, going to the back of the grid. So yeah, just a bit of a messy weekend for Max. Kind of reminded me of his start to 2018, where he obviously had all those incidents and, yeah, things didn't really go too well up until about Monaco of that year. And, yeah, just a big opportunity lost. Let's, of course, go to qualifying as well. Verstappen had got pole, but then threw it away, having not slowing down for Valtteri Bottas's crash at the end. Now, of course, he was a little bit angry that Hamilton didn't get a penalty, but just to clear that up for anyone who hasn't heard, the yellow flags hadn't come out by the time that Hamilton had passed it, so he wasn't penalised in that case. Now, by the time Verstappen came by a few seconds later, those yellow flags were showing. And Verstappen even admitted himself that he went through them and didn't slow down. So, to me, that penalty is completely, fine. I don't see any issues with it. And, again, he already had pole. That lap that he did would not have secured him pole. And he would have known that. If there was a yellow flag, he would have been told over the radio probably that, look, you're going to get it. He just threw it away unnecessarily. And, again, just a big shame. On the flip side, Alexander Albon, bit of a shaky start to the weekend of that crash in FP2, meant that Red Bull was sort of going into the race with quite a lack of spare parts, in fairness. But he recovered well, came home, I think it was P5 in the end, which, given the way the race played out, was probably the best he could have got. I don't think he would have been able to challenge the Ferraris and the Mercedes, which just had the best strategy today. And, yeah, a good weekend in general for Albon, bar that's FP2 crash. So yeah, good on him. And of course that also means that Albon has still gained more points than Verstappen has since moving to Red Bull. So yeah, I think he's basically guaranteed that seat now. I mean, I don't see Gasly stepping up. So I think it will be Albon and Verstappen at Red Bull, which, to be fair, he's impressing me more and more as the weekends go on. I think Japan was a bit of a shaky one. I think it was Singapore as well, just a little bit off the pace, didn't really, light any fires, but no, he's getting better, so good on Albon, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he does with a full season with Red Bull, well, hopefully, next year. Now, obviously, we mentioned that clash between Verstappen and Magnussen, and they just sort of topped off a bit of a poor weekend for Haas in general, and probably one of their worst weekends in Formula 1. I think it definitely goes up with that awful Australian Grand Prix last year, where they threw away a fantastic, 4th and 5th or 5th and 6th finish. And yeah, they were about as slow as the Williams cars today, and if not slower in some cases. Also, they qualified ahead, but it looked very, very likely that maybe Russell could have crept up ahead of maybe Grosjean, or even both Grosjean and Magnussen. And they're just almost admitting defeat. And in a way, it makes sense. Why would you focus on a season when you're not really going to get any higher up the order? But it is quite a shame to see Haas just not being able to upgrades on the car and just seeing that performance tumble further and further down the order. And I think by the time we get to Abu Dhabi, they're going to be nowhere. But I wouldn't be surprised if they qualify 19th and 20th at some point in the next 3 races, to be honest with you. Another team which I think threw it all the way today would be McLaren. I think there's quite a theme to this episode today. We're just with teams throwing things away. But again, they started really well, but got both cars into Q3. And then it all really just dissipated after the virtual safety car period, because I mean, Sainz was running P4 or something at some point, got ahead of Verstappen and Hamilton when they had their initial clash, held that position for quite a while actually. They got ahead of Bottas as well, I forgot about that, and then just sort of slipped back. I'm not too sure what happened to him again. He just wasn't really shown on the TVs, and just sort of fell back to, I think he finished 11th or maybe even lower than that by the end of the race. So yeah, just a bit of a shame for him really. And obviously Norris, that honestly, the worst luck. Comes into the pit stop and then just leaves with one tyre just not being secure in the car, and then having that pain to not just have to retire there, but get pushed back by his engineers, have the tyre fitted again, and then just be sent around to trundle 2 or 3 laps off the pace, off the leaders, and have to retire the car at the end. It was just a big shame for Norris today. Not much he could have really done after that pit stop. It wasn't even his fault as well. And I saw some stat with I don't think there's been a single Norris retirement that's been 100% his fault. A lot of it has been car failures, and it's just a real shame to see. And I do feel for Norris. So all that then was looking like Renault would get a double points finish, and in fairness they did after that Kvyat penalty. But let's just talk about that clash between Kvyat and Hülkenberg. I think it was the last corner, and Kvyat again goes up the inside. Obviously, last move, maybe a little bit rash and a little bit unnecessary, but he did tap Hülkenberg, spun him around into the wall. Hülkenberg ends up finishing the race without a rear wing. And, I mean, Kvyat's now blasted the stewards saying, the penalty wasn't deserved, they're killing the sport. In fairness, I think it probably was a little bit over the line on Daniel's side anyway. The move wasn't really there. It's a little bit desperate to get a couple of points. And obviously in the end he gets a 10-second penalty, I think it was, ends up getting pushed back to 11th. Hulkenberg, that means, finishes in 10th. But again, just losing points for Renault when they really need it, having been disqualified from the Japanese Grand Prix as well. So a big blow to Renault there. I don't think they're going to end up picking up enough points to overhaul McLaren for 4th. I think 5th is really the best they can sort of get. But they've really got to look out for not just Toro Rosso, but also Racing Point, who are within 10 points of them now. So they've really got to just keep an eye behind them and make sure they get those points finishes before the season is up. Or they could even be sat 6th or maybe even 7th if they have really, really poor luck. So, yeah, it's an interesting one for Renault, a difficult situation to be in. I think Daniel Ricciardo was saying that the morale is a little bit low as well. So, yeah, hopefully we can have a good finish to the season for those guys and they can just move on into next year with a better car. Final few pointers then. Daniel Ricciardo and Sergio Perez having fantastic races, both getting into the points and both pulling off some pretty cool manoeuvres as well. Had a very good battle in the first sector. I think Ricciardo did a little bit of off-roading at one point, but it was good to see and a good bit of excitement with a race that was sort of patchy here and there with excitement, but maybe not the most thrilling that we've had so far this season. Although I still don't think we're going to be able to beat the craziness of Germany, but hey. So those were just my thoughts then. So the real talk now is going to be down in the comments. What did you think of this race? Were Verstappen's clashes more his fault or more the faults of Hamilton, Bottas and Magnussen? I want you to let me know down in the comments below. And of course, I will try to respond to as many people as I can. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next one.